Vast deserts once threatened to erase all who entered, but ancient caravans crossed them anyway. This is the untold story of the desert caravans that mastered impossible terrain. By the end, you will understand how these forgotten journeys built the foundations of our modern world. We will uncover how they navigated trackless sands and why entire cities vanished without a trace. What does it truly take for human spirit to conquer the most hostile places on Earth? The silence of the desert is a physical force, an oppressive weight under a relentless sun. To stand at the edge of the empty quarter or the Sahara is to confront a world designed to reject life. This was the impossible terrain, a hyper-arid landscape of endless, shifting dunes where temperatures could swing from blistering heat to bone-chilling cold within a single day. Ancient geographers called these places the abode of silence, and for good reason. Navigation here was not about following a trail, but about reading a language written in sand and stars, where a single mistake meant vanishing forever. The challenges were constant and multifaceted. Sandstorms known as haboobs could descend without warning, whipping the landscape into a frenzy and completely erasing any sign of a path. The sheer distance between oases meant that carrying enough water was a logistical nightmare, with dehydration a silent, ever-present companion. Consider the Qattara Depression in the Libyan desert, a vast, salt marsh and sand sea so treacherous that for centuries, many believed it was an impassable barrier. It was against this very backdrop of extreme hostility that the Caravaniers plotted their courses. Their story is not just one of survival, but of profound understanding. How did these master navigators learn to read the whispers of the desert? Their knowledge was a living map, etched not on parchment but in memory. The caravan master, the khabir, was the beating heart of any successful crossing. This figure was far more than a simple guide. He was an architect of movement, a polymath whose expertise spanned astronomy, geology, diplomacy, and human psychology. His authority was born from a lineage of knowledge, an oral tradition passed from father to son, a collection of secrets so vital they were guarded as fiercely as any treasure. The great traveler Ibn Battuta himself observed that without such guides, the desert was a prison without walls. This was not a casual compliment, it was a stark statement of fact. The khabir's mind held the only key. His primary art was reading a landscape that appeared utterly blank to the untrained eye. He could decipher the language of the dunes. The shape, size, and alignment of sand formations told him not just where he was, but the direction of prevailing winds and the stability of the ground beneath his feet. A specific, oddly shaped rock outcrop on the horizon, a particular cluster of hardy desert plants, these were his signposts. Tuareg guides in the Sahara, for instance, used distinct mountain peaks as celestial markers, lining them up with the rising and setting of specific stars to maintain a dead-straight course across hundreds of miles of featureless plains. He could predict the haboob, the terrifying sandstorm, by reading subtle shifts in the wind and air pressure long before the first dark cloud appeared on the horizon. But his role extended far beyond navigation. The caravan was a temporary, mobile city, a fragile society under immense stress. The khabir was its mayor and judge. He mediated disputes between wealthy merchants, ensured the fair distribution of scarce water, and maintained the morale of countless camel drivers. His word was law because unity was the difference between life and death. He transformed a disparate collection of individuals and animals into a single, resilient organism, capable of withstanding the desert's relentless attempts to break it apart. So, what specific tools allowed these masters to perform such incredible feats of wayfinding across such a vast and empty canvas? The desert sky offered a perfect, glittering map. Freed from the haze of settled lands, the stars burned with an intensity that felt almost close enough to touch. For the caravan master, this celestial dome was his most reliable chart. He knew the constellations not as distant myths but as practical tools. Ursa Major, the Great Bear, wheeled around the fixed point of the pole star, a beacon of true north that guided countless journeys across the Sahara. Orion, with its distinctive belt, rose and set with the seasons, offering another unshakable reference in a world of shifting sands. This was not casual stargazing, it was a sophisticated science. Caravaniers, often building on knowledge refined by Islamic scholars like al-Biruni, used simple but effective instruments to measure the angles of stars above the horizon. A cross staff, a humble piece of wood with a sliding crosspiece, could determine a star's altitude, which in turn revealed their latitude, their position north or south. This meant that even on a perfectly featureless plain, under a moonless sky, they could know exactly where they were on the Earth. They committed the sky's rhythms to memory, learning how each constellation shifted with the passing months, creating a celestial calendar that dictated the timing of their voyages. These night marches were a strategic necessity, a way to avoid the brutal, energy-sapping heat of the day. The cool darkness became their element, the rhythm of the camel's footsteps syncopated with the slow turn of the heavens. For many, this guidance was more than mechanical. It felt spiritual, as if the stars themselves were divine signposts placed for their survival. Yet the sky was only one part of the navigator's toolkit. To rely solely on the stars would be a fatal mistake on a planet that was constantly, subtly moving. The desert floor itself held a parallel language of guidance, written in the sand and the wind. The desert floor was a living text for those who knew how to read it. While the stars provided a grand, celestial map, the land itself offered a more intimate and immediate guide, a constant stream of information written in sand, wind, and life. The caravan master's genius lay in interpreting this subtle language, a lore passed down through generations in the form of proverbs, poems, and songs. These were not mere stories, they were encrypted survival manuals. A specific curve in a dune, known as a barchan, could tell him the direction of the prevailing wind for the last season, and therefore the likely path to the next reliable well. The whisper of the wind shifting to a certain pitch might warn of a distant haboob, a sandstorm still hours away but already sending its atmospheric heralds. This environmental literacy extended to the desert's sparse but telling wildlife. A particular type of hardy acacia tree, surviving where nothing else could, indicated that its roots were tapping a deep water table, a sign to start digging. The sight of a specific bird, like a sand grouse flying in a determined direction at dawn, was a well-known signal. These birds had an unerring instinct for hidden oasis pockets, and following their flight path could lead a desperate caravan to salvation. The Bedouin of the Arabian desert became legendary for their ability to identify singing sands, dunes that produced a low hum when the wind passed over them or when disturbed. This phenomenon often indicated compact, stable sand, whereas silence could mean loose, treacherous ground that might collapse under the weight of a loaded camel. This entire body of knowledge was a communal asset, a treasure more valuable than any silk or spice. It was not written in books but woven into the fabric of their culture, shared around campfires from elder to apprentice. A young boy would learn that the arrival of the seasonal harmattan wind, dry and dusty from the northeast, meant a period of cooler temperatures but also increased the risk of immense sky-darkening dust storms. This shared wisdom transformed the desert from a chaotic and lethal void into a navigable space with its own distinct rhythms and recognizable signposts. It was a dialogue between people and place, a conversation that ensured survival. Yet, for all this sophisticated wayfinding, one elemental need dictated every single decision: the relentless, desperate quest for water. An oasis was far more than a patch of green. It was a living, breathing metropolis in miniature, a miracle of water and shade that meant the difference between life and a silent demise in the dunes. These lush sanctuaries erupted from the barren expanse around natural springs or through the genius of man-made qanats, underground channels that tapped into distant aquifers, bringing life-giving water to the surface. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the legendary Siwa oasis in Egypt, a place not only of towering date palms and clear pools, but a crucial cultural crossroads where goods, gossip, and gods were traded alongside water barrels. Control over such a place was not merely an economic advantage, it was a stranglehold on the lifelines of entire regions. Tribes and empires knew that the master of the oasis held the key to the desert itself, and conflicts over these verdant jewels shaped the political map of the ancient world. A caravan's entire schedule was a desperate race against its own dwindling supplies, meticulously planned to stagger from one known water source to the next. But the truly skilled khabir held a deeper secret: the location of lesser-known springs, unmarked on any map but vital in a crisis. The Ghadames oasis in Libya, for example, was a legendary node on the trans-Saharan route. Here, the air was thick with the scent of dates and the sounds of a dozen languages, as caravans bartered for salt, a commodity as precious as gold in the interior, and allowed their camels to gorge on the lush vegetation. These stops were incubators of civilization, where a Berber merchant might share a meal with a trader from Timbuktu, exchanging not just spices but stories, technological ideas, and even words from their respective tongues. This constant flow of people and knowledge meant that the desert was never truly a barrier but a filter, a vast network that connected worlds. Yet reaching these havens required more than just knowing their location. It demanded a ruthless, precise calculation of consumption and a profound understanding of the single most important asset on the journey: the camel itself. How did these caravans, sometimes numbering in the thousands, ensure they carried enough to survive the vast, waterless stretches between one life-saving oasis and the next? No creature was more vital to this fragile enterprise than the camel. Its legendary ability to survive weeks without water was not magic, but a masterpiece of biological engineering. The camel's hump stores fat, not water, a concentrated energy reserve that its body metabolizes, producing water as a byproduct. Its kidneys are supremely efficient, producing urine so concentrated it is almost a syrup, and its nasal passages reclaim moisture from its own breath before it is exhaled into the dry desert air. These adaptations created a living canteen, an animal that could thrive where horses and oxen would perish within days. The single-humped dromedary camel became the undisputed champion of the Arabian and Saharan routes, its broad, padded feet perfectly designed to walk on soft, shifting sand without sinking. As the historian Richard Bulliet argued, the adoption of the camel did not just improve desert transport, it utterly revolutionized it. This shift enabled caravans to bypass older, slower coastal routes and strike out directly across the heart of the desert, forging new economic and cultural highways. But the camel's value extended far beyond its sheer carrying capacity. It was a mobile resource factory. Its milk provided a reliable, nutritious drink, its meat could sustain travelers in an emergency, and its dried dung was often the only fuel available to cook meals and provide warmth during the cold desert nights. The relationship between a cameleer and his charges was profound. Trainers learned to read the subtle signs of a camel's health, from the set of its ears to the moisture in its nose, knowing that a single sick animal could jeopardize the entire mission. They guided their trains with unique vocal cues and songs, a language understood by both man and beast. A well-managed caravan, with its camels moving at a steady, rocking gait, could cover 25 miles in a single day, a pace that made the impossible distances of the desert suddenly negotiable. This incredible biological machine was the engine of trade, but it raises a pressing question. What precious cargo was so valuable, so desperately desired, that it justified harnessing these living ships for such a perilous and monumental undertaking? These chests of gold and salt were more than mere cargo. They were the very lifeblood of continents. Gold, mined from the legendary pits of Bambuk in West Africa, traveled north on the backs of camels, destined for the coffers of Mediterranean empires. In the opposite direction came salt, carved in heavy, crystalline blocks from the blistering mines of Taghaza, a place so desolate it was said to be built entirely of salt and the bones of slaves. South of the Sahara, salt was not a seasoning. It was a biological necessity, a mineral so vital for preserving food and replacing electrolytes lost in the tropical heat that it was literally traded for its weight in gold. Then there were the spices, cinnamon from Ceylon and pepper from the Malabar coast. Their sense of fragrant promise of flavor and preservation were bundled and traded from hand to hand until they finally entered the desert network. A single sack of peppercorns could make a merchant wealthy for life, but it had to cross 1,000 miles of sand first. This circulation of luxury and necessity created staggering wealth. It financed the empires of Ghana and Mali, building their legendary cities and funding their armies. The pilgrimage of Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, to Mecca in the 14th century is the most famous example. His caravan was said to include 60,000 people and 80 camels carrying nothing but gold dust, which he distributed so generously along his route that he inadvertently caused a years-long depression in the gold markets of Cairo and Medina. But the value of these goods went far beyond economics. Salt was often used in religious rituals and as a symbol of purity and covenant. In the grand courts of Europe and the Middle East, the ability to season food with exotic spices was a powerful, visible display of one's reach and influence, a direct connection to the mysterious and distant East. Yet, the most transformative cargo was often intangible. A merchant haggling over a block of salt in Timbuktu would not only exchange goods, but also words, news, and technological ideas. The design of a water wheel, a new method for tanning leather, a philosophical debate stirring in a far-off university, all of these hitched a ride with the caravans. This constant, slow-moving exchange transformed the desert from a simple obstacle into a sprawling, cultural melting pot, where the fate of an empire could be decided by the price of salt and the flow of an idea. The true wealth of the caravan was not measured in gold or salt alone, but in the invisible cargo of ideas it carried. These slow-moving processions across the sands became rolling universities, where merchants, pilgrims, and scholars were packed together for months on end, their conversations weaving a tapestry of shared knowledge under the vast desert sky. Islam found its swiftest path into sub-Saharan Africa not through armies but along these trade routes. Muslim merchants, respected for their literacy and business acumen, became informal ambassadors of their faith. They did not necessarily preach, but their daily rituals of prayer, their codes of conduct, and their very presence introduced new spiritual concepts to the kingdoms they visited. Over time, local rulers saw advantage in aligning with this vast, interconnected network of believers, leading to the gradual and often peaceful adoption of Islamic traditions, law, and architecture. This spiritual exchange was mirrored by a practical one. The Arabic script, a powerful tool for record-keeping and correspondence, was adopted for writing local languages like Hausa and Swahili, transforming administration and literature. The sophisticated Arabic numerical system, including the revolutionary concept of zero, slowly replaced clumsier counting methods, unlocking new potentials in mathematics and trade calculation. Imagine a merchant in a bustling Sahelian market, now able to calculate complex profits and losses with an ease that was previously unimaginable. This was the quiet, everyday revolution of the caravan. Knowledge of advanced irrigation techniques like the Qanat system from Persia traveled south, allowing oasis towns to bloom more reliably. In return, sub-Saharan agricultural knowledge and unique metallurgical skills filtered north. The camel saddle itself is a perfect example of this technological dialogue. The North African saddle, designed to sit high on the dromedary's hump, gave riders a commanding position for warfare. But Arabian traders adapted the design, creating a lower, more stable platform ideal for securing heavy loads of merchandise. This was not a one-way transfer, but a continuous process of improvement and adaptation, driven by the practical needs of the journey. All of this intellectual and spiritual traffic converged in legendary caravan cities, with Timbuktu standing as the ultimate symbol. By the 15th century, it was not merely a market for salt and gold, but one of the world's great centers of learning. Its libraries overflowed with thousands of manuscripts on law, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. In the shaded courtyards of the Sankore University, a scholar from Fez could debate theology with a jurist from Cairo, while a local poet transcribed epic verses using Arabic script. This was the cosmopolitan atmosphere forged by the caravans, a world where identity was fluid and knowledge was the most sought-after treasure. These networks did not just move goods, they moved minds, setting the stage for golden ages in the most unexpected places. This grand exchange of culture and belief, however, was lived by ordinary people facing an extraordinary daily reality. What was it truly like to wake up each day as part of a desert caravan, to feel the grit of sand in your food and the immense weight of the horizon ahead? The rhythm of the caravan was a brutal, unyielding metronome set against the silence of the sands. A caravanier's day did not begin with the sun, but in the deep chill of the pre-dawn hours when the stars were still bright overhead. The camp stirred not to an alarm, but to the low grumbling of the camels and the soft, urgent voices of the handlers. Before the first hint of light touched the eastern horizon, prayers were offered, a moment of spiritual grounding before the physical trial began. Breakfast was a spare, functional affair, a handful of dates, some dried grains, and a carefully measured sip of water, just enough to fuel the body without wasting precious resources. The march commenced as a gray line appeared in the sky, the goal being to cover as much distance as possible before the sun reached its full, punishing height. The caravan did not move as a chaotic mob, but as a disciplined procession with each person locked into a vital role. Scouts, often on the fastest camels, ranged miles ahead, their eyes scanning the shimmering horizon for the next landmark or any sign of trouble. Guards flanked the column, their vigilance a constant shield against the ever-present threat of desert bandits, who saw the slow-moving train as a treasure chest on the hoof. And at the heart of it all, the camel handlers walked alongside their chargers, reading the animal's fatigue in the droop of an ear or the slight stumble of a foot, constantly adjusting the pace to preserve their strength. Breaks were not for rest but for survival. They were brief, strategic pauses in whatever sliver of shade a rock outcrop could provide. Water was distributed not by thirst but by strict ration, each person receiving just enough to wet their throat and keep the body functioning. The camels were checked, their loads shifted, and any minor repairs to harnesses were made with hurried, efficient hands. Then the signal would come, and the entire machine would lurch back into motion, the silence broken only by the rhythmic plod of padded feet and the creak of leather. When the sun finally began its descent, the day's work was far from over. The evening camp was a fortress erected in the wilderness. Camels were knelt in a protective circle, their bodies forming a living wall. Tents were pitched and gear was meticulously repaired, for a broken waterskin or a frayed rope could mean death later on. Then, as the cold of the night descended, the campfires sparked to life. It was around these fires that the caravan truly became a community. Meals were shared, stories were exchanged, and news from 100 different homelands was passed along. The Moroccan traveler Leo Africanus wrote of the profound camaraderie that grew from shared hardship, of the songs that fought back the loneliness of the immense, dark landscape. He described the physical toll, the blistered feet rubbed raw by sand, the constant, gnawing anxiety of taking a wrong turn in a world with no roads. Yet within this grueling routine, caravaneers found a strange sense of purpose. The journey had its own rhythm, a certainty that each day would bring a familiar cycle of struggle and respite. For some, the drive was the prospect of profit waiting in a distant market. For others, it was the spiritual reward of a pilgrimage, each step a form of devotion. This life demanded a resilience that was both physical and mental, a toughness honed over years where a single moment of carelessness could unravel everything. This carefully maintained order, however, existed under constant threat. How did these mobile communities, carrying such immense wealth, protect themselves from the predators, both human and natural, that stalked the trade routes? The desert's emptiness was an illusion, its silence a mask for constant, watchful danger. Beyond the sandstorms and thirst, the greatest threat often came from other men, bandits who saw the slow-moving caravan as a treasure chest on the hoof. These raiders, often from impoverished desert tribes themselves, knew the land just as well as the khabir. An attack was not a chaotic brawl, but a swift, surgical strike aimed at the most valuable pack animals before melting back into the dunes. Defense, therefore, was a sophisticated and multi-layered strategy. Caravans traveled in the largest numbers they could manage, presenting a formidable, sprawling target that was difficult to surround and overwhelm. They hired professional armed escorts, often from the very tribes known for producing raiders, a clever tactic that bought protection with one hand while denying enemies recruits with the other. These mercenaries were not just hired muscle, they were diplomats and trackers, able to negotiate safe passage with local chieftains or read the subtle signs of an ambush days in the making. The route itself was a closely guarded secret. A khabir would never take the same path twice in a row, weaving a complex, unpredictable web across the sands to confuse any pursuers. Scouts were his eyes and ears, ranging miles ahead to search for the telltale traces of a waiting enemy, a recently disturbed dune, the faint remains of a campfire, or the distant glint of sunlight on a weapon. When nature itself turned violent, the response was just as immediate. The approach of a haboob sent a wave of disciplined urgency through the column. There was no panic, only practiced routine. Camels were forced to their knees and huddled tightly together, their bodies forming a living, breathing wall against the stinging sand. Riders would crouch in the lee of this great beastly barrier, wrapping their heads in cloth and waiting out the roaring, blinding fury. In rockier deserts like the Gobi, the strategy shifted, with caravans scrambling for the shelter of canyons or rock overhangs to escape not only sandstorms but also the deadly, sudden blizzards that could freeze a man where he stood. In every crisis, all eyes turned to the caravan master. His leadership in these moments was absolute. A single wrong decision, a moment of hesitation in the face of an advancing storm or a bandit charge, could mean the loss of every life and every good. He had to weigh the risk of pushing forward against the danger of stopping, judge the strength of an enemy against the morale of his own guards, and make a choice in the space of a heartbeat. This perpetual balance between immense risk and staggering reward was the very essence of desert trade. It was a high-stakes gamble where the ultimate prize was not just survival but arrival. After months of hardship and constant vigilance, the caravan's goal finally shimmered into view, not as a mirage but as a sprawling, noisy, magnificent reality. The caravan's arrival at a terminus city was an eruption of sound, color, and smell after the desert's profound silence. Ahead lay the fabled gates of Samarkand, the towering walls of Marrakech, or the bustling river ports of Baghdad, each a testament to the wealth that flowed from the sands. These were not just destinations, they were the pulsating hearts of entire civilizations, built and sustained by the caravan trade. Their very skyline was a declaration of power and prosperity, with minarets and domes reaching for the heavens, all funded by the taxes on salt, gold, and spices. The first and most overwhelming experience for a weary traveler was the souk, a labyrinthine marketplace that operated under its own complex laws. Here, in the shaded alleys, a merchant from Venice might haggle over Chinese silk with a trader from Gujarat, while a craftsman from Damascus sold inlaid metalwork to a noble from Cordoba. The air was thick with the scent of exotic perfumes, tanned leather, and sizzling kebabs. Every transaction was measured, weighed, and taxed, with a portion of the value flowing directly into the city's coffers, financing armies, palaces, and public works. This constant influx of goods and gold transformed these hubs into cosmopolitan melting pots. Cairo, strategically positioned at the nexus of African and Asian routes, became a global center of learning, its legendary Al-Azhar University attracting scholars in law, medicine, and astronomy from across the known world. The city's governance was deeply intertwined with managing the trade, ensuring security on the approaches to the Nile and standardizing currencies to simplify commerce for 1,000 different languages. For the exhausted Caravanier, the most welcome sight was the Caravanserai. These were not mere inns but fortified economic engines. Located just outside the city walls, a caravanserai was a square, fortress-like structure with a single massive gate. Inside, a central courtyard offered space for hundreds of camels to rest and be fed, while arcaded rooms on the upper levels provided simple lodgings for the merchants. Here, goods were securely stored, deals were finalized, and travelers from opposite ends of the earth shared a meal. In a caravanserai on the Silk Road, a Persian merchant might learn from a Chinese traveler about the revolutionary new concept of paper, a discovery that would eventually transform record-keeping from Europe to the Maghreb. These institutions were the vital synapses in the nervous system of global trade, where merchandise was not just exchanged but transformed. Raw silk from the East was woven into exquisite fabrics, African gold was minted into coins, and exotic spices were blended into local cuisines. This refining process multiplied the value of the caravan's cargo, spreading wealth to artisans, porters, and shopkeepers, and creating a thriving urban economy that reached far beyond the market stalls. The sheer concentration of wealth and knowledge in these termini gave their rulers unprecedented power. So how did the fate of entire empires become tied to the steady, plodding footsteps of camels in the desert? The shifting sands held the power to crown kings and topple empires. A ruler's treasury was not just measured in gold coins, but in the steady flow of camel caravans crossing his territory. The great empires of the desert, from Rome to Mali, understood this fundamental truth. Their wealth and power were built not on conquest alone, but on their ability to control, tax, and protect the lifeblood of trans-Saharan trade. The Ghana Empire, at its peak between the 9th and 11th centuries, perfected this model. Its rulers did not necessarily own the gold mines, but they controlled the trade routes leading to them. By imposing heavy taxes on every load of salt coming south and every ounce of gold heading north, they accumulated staggering riches. Arab historians of the time wrote with astonishment of the Ghanaian king, who held a massive gold nugget as a symbol of his power, while his horses were tethered to gold blocks. This influx of capital allowed Ghana to build a professional army, a complex bureaucracy, and magnificent cities that awed foreign visitors. But this dependence on trade was also a vulnerability. When new routes opened up, bypassing Ghana's control, or when rival powers seized key oasis towns, the empire's wealth evaporated, leading to its eventual decline. This pattern repeated itself across the desert world. The Abbasid Caliphate, centered in Baghdad, forged strategic alliances with powerful Bedouin tribes to secure the Darb al-Arbain, the brutal 40-day road that connected the Nile Valley to Darfur. In exchange for protection and safe passage, the Caliphate offered these nomadic groups political favors and a share of the profits, weaving a web of mutual interest that stabilized the entire region. A secure trade route meant a full treasury, which in turn funded monumental projects like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where scholars translated the world's knowledge. Yet this interdependence was a double-edged sword. A single breakdown in these delicate alliances, a rebellion by a once loyal tribe, or the rise of a more attractive trade route elsewhere could strangle an empire's revenue, leaving its armies unpaid and its monuments half-finished. The archaeological record tells this story of boom and bust in crumbling walls and abandoned caravanserais. The ruins of Sijil Mossa in Morocco, once a glorious gate to the desert, stand as a silent testament to an empire that lost its grip on the caravan traffic. This relentless pressure to maintain control over such a vast and unforgiving landscape sparked a quiet revolution in technology. What ingenious tools did these empires and their caravaneers invent to master the immense challenges of their world? The camel's back was a canvas for human ingenuity. While the animal itself was a marvel of nature, its true potential was unlocked by a suite of clever innovations that transformed the caravan from a risky venture into a reliable enterprise. The most crucial of these was the saddle. The North African saddle, with its high wooden frame, was a masterpiece of ergonomic design. It didn't just give a rider a commanding view. It was engineered to distribute the weight of heavy trade goods evenly across the camel's strong spine and ribcage. This prevented painful sores and spinal injuries that could cripple a valuable animal, allowing it to carry significantly heavier loads for much longer distances. With this simple but profound improvement, the economic equation of desert trade shifted dramatically, as a single camel could now carry more salt, more gold, more silk. Water, the desert's true currency, demanded its own revolution in storage. Caravaneers moved beyond simple clay pots, which were heavy and prone to shattering. They perfected the art of the water skin, crafting massive containers from the hides of goats or camels. These weren't just bags, they were preserved through a meticulous tanning process that made the leather supple and nearly watertight, dramatically slowing the relentless evaporation that stole precious liquid under the desert sun. Some caravan groups operating on well-established routes took this a step further by creating secret, buried caches of water and supplies along the way. These hidden larders, known only to a trusted few, acted as emergency resupply points, turning a known, waterless stretch of dunes from a death sentence into a manageable challenge. Wayfinding, too, evolved from pure memory to incorporate elegant tools. While the stars were a constant guide, the camel offered a precise way to chart a course. This deceptively simple device was just a small, rectangular piece of wood attached to a string. The navigator would hold the camel at arm's length, aligning the top edge with the pole star and the bottom edge with the horizon. By tying knots in the string corresponding to different latitudes, he could reliably determine his position north or south, turning the vast, empty sea of sand into a grid that could be methodically crossed. On the ground, Persian caravaneers demonstrated a brilliant understanding of hydrology, mapping the subtle signs of underground water channels to pinpoint the best locations for new wells and oases, effectively creating their own destinations through knowledge. These cumulative advances, from the saddle on the camel's back to the map of water under the sand, represented a fundamental shift. Humanity was no longer just surviving the desert's challenges, it was systematically solving them. Each invention built upon the last, creating a feedback loop of efficiency and safety that allowed trade networks to push deeper into previously impassable territories. This growing mastery over the environment generated a new wealth, not just of goods but of experiences and stories. How did these travelers ensure their hard-won knowledge and their very stories would survive the journey and inform the generations to come? The desert story is written in ink as well as sand. Long before modern archaeology, the most vivid portraits of caravan life came from the travelers who lived it, men like Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo, whose journals became windows into a vanished world. These were not dry historical records, but vibrant, personal narratives filled with the dust of the road and the wonder of discovery. When Battuta described his journey across the Sahara in the 14th century, he did more than list distances, he painted a picture of human resilience. He wrote of the overwhelming generosity he encountered at remote oases, where hosts would welcome exhausted strangers with feasts, expecting nothing in return, bound by a sacred code of desert hospitality that often meant the difference between life and death. His writings detailed the unspoken laws that governed the caravaneers themselves, a strict ethical system that managed everything from the division of water to the punishment for theft, maintaining order in a place where chaos was always one misstep away. These accounts were priceless to the merchants who followed, acting as practical guides that told them not only where to find water, but how to behave once they got there. Yet these travelogues were a blend of sharp observation and captivating myth. A caravan master might swear to Marco Polo about vast deserts haunted by spirits that whispered to travelers, leading them astray. The Venetian merchant recorded tales of the legendary roc, a bird so immense it could carry off an elephant, stories born from the vast, lonely landscapes where the mind filled emptiness with marvels. These were not necessarily lies, but a different kind of truth, reflecting the profound psychological impact of the journey itself. The most enduring legend was that of a lost city of gold, hidden somewhere in the heart of the dunes, a tale that would spur centuries of exploration and conquest. The libraries of Timbuktu safeguard this dual heritage. Their fragile manuscripts contain precise maps of stars and wells, meticulous diaries logging the price of salt in Timbuktu or the tax on cloth in Cairo, and philosophical musings from scholars who had crossed continents. One ledger might detail the cost of hiring 20 camels for a 40-day journey, while the next page recounts a strange dream under a full moon. What emerges from these pages is not just a map of trade, but a map of personal transformation. The desert did not simply test the body, it reshaped the soul. Writers spoke of a profound inner change, a stripping away of the non-essential that happened as the miles stretched on. The man who arrived at his destination was rarely the same one who had set out, having been forged in the crucible of heat and silence. These chronicles give us the human heartbeat behind the epic scale of the caravans, the individual fears, hopes, and revelations that no artifact can fully capture. They are a reminder that the greatest journeys are measured not just in miles, but in the quiet evolution of the human spirit. But how much of this incredible story can be trusted to memory and parchment alone? What secrets do archaeological findings add to this narrative? Our next section uncovers the material evidence. A single shard of pottery, unearthed from the sands of Coombe by sail, can whisper a story of continents connected. These broken pieces of ceramic, found far from where they were fired, are the silent witnesses the caravans left behind. At the great caravan city of Palmyra, archaeologists have unearthed coins minted in Rome, India, and Parthia, all from the same dusty layer of soil. This is not just evidence of trade, it is proof of a globalized marketplace operating 2,000 years ago. Each foreign coin, each fragment of distinctive Roman glass found in a West African burial mound, is a data point confirming that these routes were not just occasional footpaths, but thriving, organized superhighways of commerce and culture. The very layout of these sites speaks volumes. The sprawling foundations of caravanserais, with their massive central courtyards and rows of small rooms, tell us about the scale of the operation, how many camels could be sheltered, how many merchants needed a bed. But the most revealing discoveries are often the ones we cannot see from the surface. Advanced technologies like LiDAR scanning, which uses lasers to map the ground from the air, have peeled back the desert skin to reveal a hidden geography. In the Sahara, these scans have detected the faint, ghostly traces of paths worn deep into the earth by countless camel feet, routes that deliberately curve away from obvious landmarks like mountains or large oases. This was a security measure. The most successful caravans were the ones that left no visible trace for bandits to follow, navigating instead by a secret mental map of subtle dips and rises in the terrain that are now only visible to machines. These findings have fundamentally rewritten history. For a long time, scholars viewed regions like sub-Saharan Africa as isolated from the major currents of the ancient world. The discovery of Roman artifacts deep in West Africa shattered that assumption. We now know that caravans were not just moving goods, they were facilitating a continuous, slow-motion dialogue between empires and kingdoms. By analyzing the layers of a trash mound at a desert way station, historians can now determine the timing and frequency of these journeys, seeing the boom years when Mediterranean glass was plentiful and the bust periods when only local pottery remained. Each artifact, from a Chinese silk scrap in an Egyptian tomb to a North African bead in a Scandinavian hoard, is a single puzzle piece. When assembled, they reveal a picture of astonishing interconnection, a world that was far more complex and intimately linked than we ever previously believed. This growing body of hard evidence has forced a complete re-evaluation of the caravan's place in history. So how have our modern interpretations of these epic journeys shifted with each new discovery? For centuries, the story of global trade was often told as a European epic, beginning with the Age of Exploration. But modern scholarship is systematically dismantling that narrative, revealing a far more ancient and complex world system built on camel caravans. Historians and archaeologists now see these desert routes not as isolated footnotes, but as the central arteries of a pre-modern globalization. The old idea that innovation flowed in only one direction, from the so-called West to the rest, is being overturned by the evidence itself. Take the analysis of textile fragments discovered in Silk Road caves. For a long time, these silks were assumed to be solely Chinese, but advanced microscopic analysis has revealed something astonishing. Some of the most intricate weaving patterns and dyeing techniques found in these Asian artifacts actually originated in workshops in West Africa and the Middle East. This proves that the exchange was not a one-way street. It was a vibrant, bidirectional conversation in craftsmanship, where African textile innovations were prized and imitated thousands of miles away. This was not a passive receiving of goods, but an active, creative partnership across continents. The influential historian Janet Abu-Lughod powerfully argued that long before European ships dominated the oceans, a sophisticated world system was already in place, centered on these overland routes. In her model, this system linked the economies of Europe, the Middle East, India, and China into a single, interdependent network, with caravan cities like Baghdad and Samarkand as its bustling hubs. This perspective fundamentally shifts our understanding of history. It gives full agency back to the African and Middle Eastern societies who are not merely stops on a route, but the brilliant architects and primary beneficiaries of this vast economic web. The empires of Mali and Ghana were not peripheral outliers. They were core powers whose wealth and influence directly shaped global markets for centuries. This new scholarship is also deeply interdisciplinary, weaving together threads from unexpected sources. By analyzing pollen cores taken from ancient oasis lakebeds, scientists can track the rise and fall of caravan traffic. A sudden spike in the pollen of date palms and cultivated grains signals a boom period, a bustling hub of activity. A subsequent layer dominated by desert scrub pollen tells a story of abandonment, perhaps triggered by a prolonged drought that made the route untenable. This environmental data provides a timeline, connecting climate shifts directly to the vitality of these trade networks. It shows that the fate of empires was often tied to the availability of water in a distant well. So what enduring lessons do these ancient journeys hold for our interconnected modern world? The caravans teach us about resilience built on diversity and adaptability. They succeeded not through brute force, but through a deep, nuanced understanding of different cultures, environments, and technologies. They show us that the most durable networks are those built on mutual benefit, where knowledge and innovation are allowed to flow freely in all directions. In an age of supply chain disruptions and climate uncertainty, the caravans offer a timeless model. They remind us that true connection is not just about moving products, but about the shared wisdom that makes the journey possible. Resilience was not a lofty ideal for the Caravanier, but a daily practice etched into every decision. When a trusted oasis well ran dry, the caravan master did not simply press on with blind hope. He activated a deep, adaptive memory, recalling a lesser-known seep a day's journey to the east, a secret passed down through generations. This was their core strength, an operational flexibility built on a foundation of shared, decentralized knowledge. Their water conservation techniques were a masterclass in sustainability. The precise rationing of every sip, the use of sealed animal skins to minimize evaporation, and the strategic placement of hidden supply caches created a system that maximized every drop of a finite resource. In an age confronting severe water scarcity, these ancient practices offer profound lessons for managing our own strained reserves. The caravan's very structure was a testament to the power of cooperation over individualism. A wealthy merchant, a lowly camel driver, and an armed guard from different tribes and traditions were bound together by a single, non-negotiable truth: their survival depended on one another. This necessity forged a unique social contract, a temporary community where diverse skills were pooled for the common good. This collaborative spirit mirrors the modern ethos of open-source networks, where decentralized communities share vital information to solve complex problems, from software development to disaster response. The caravans prove that human ingenuity often burns brightest under the pressure of harsh constraints, transforming seemingly insurmountable obstacles into catalysts for innovation. The deep tracks they left in the sand did not simply vanish with the arrival of the steam engine. How did these pathways of the past quietly shape the world we move through today? The same invisible tracks that guided camel caravans 1,000 years ago now lie beneath ribbons of asphalt and steel. Modern highways across North Africa and the Middle East, along with crucial rail lines, often follow the exact corridors painstakingly mapped by ancient khabirs. The logic of the land remains unchanged. The most efficient pass through a mountain range or the safest path around a dune sea is as true for a truck driver today as it was for a caravaneer then. This is perhaps the caravan's most tangible legacy. Its routes literally paved into our contemporary infrastructure, proving that the most enduring maps are not drawn on paper, but worn into the earth itself. In recognition of this profound cultural impact, UNESCO has designated the entire incense route of Arabia a World Heritage Site. This network of paths, which once carried frankincense and myrrh from Yemen to the Mediterranean, is now protected not just as a collection of ruins, but as a living monument to the first global supply chain. The preservation effort ensures that the caravanserais, ancient harbors, and desert forts along the way will continue to tell their story. This historical continuity even echoes in modern economic agreements. Contemporary trade pacts across the Sahel region of Africa often facilitate the movement of goods along updated versions of these ancient paths, with trucks now carrying commodities that once would have been balanced on either side of a camel. The cultural memory of the caravan is not locked away in museums. It is a vibrant, living force. In Mali, the annual festival of the desert, though sometimes displaced by conflict, was created to celebrate Tuareg culture and its inseparable connection to trans-Saharan travel. Through music, poetry, and storytelling, these gatherings keep the oral histories alive, passing down the same sense of journey and community that once thrived around desert campfires. The ancient innovations in logistics, the diplomatic agreements with different tribes, the very model of a mobile, cooperative society, all of these inform our modern understanding of global connectivity. They solved problems of supply chain management and cross-cultural negotiation that businesses still grapple with today. Yet for all we have learned, profound mysteries remain. Why did some of the greatest caravan cities, places that thrived for centuries, suddenly fall silent? What specific navigational secrets, known only to a few lineage holders, were lost when their way of life faded? What undiscovered caravanserais or lost caches of trade goods still lie buried beneath the shifting dunes, holding untold chapters of this epic story? The desert, it seems, is still reluctant to surrender all of its secrets. Even the most meticulously planned caravan could simply disappear. For every successful crossing, countless others vanished into the emptiness, their stories swallowed by the sands and transformed into legend. The most enduring of these tales is the fabled city of Brass, an entire metropolis said to be filled with incalculable treasure and silent, automated servants, but utterly devoid of life. Expeditions sent to find it were said to have been led astray by mirages or ensnared by jinn, never to return. These stories were more than just campfire tales. They were cautionary myths born from the very real, terrifying possibility of being utterly erased from the world without a trace. One of history's most tantalizing mysteries is the lost army of Cambyses. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, a Persian force of 50,000 men was sent across the Egyptian desert to the Siwa oasis. A sudden, colossal sandstorm, a haboob of unimaginable scale, was said to have descended upon them, burying every soldier, every weapon, and every supply cart in an instant. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure fiction, yet modern archaeologists have not entirely ruled it out, pondering if a smaller, elite caravan could have met such a fate in the vast Great Sand Sea. The desert is a master of concealment, capable of hiding an entire army beneath a new landscape of dunes in a single, furious night. Other legends speak not of loss, but of hidden wealth, of caravans that buried their gold or artifacts at a remote waterhole to lighten their load during a crisis, with the intention of returning later, a return that never came. These rumored caches have fueled treasure hunts for generations, drawing modern adventurers with metal detectors and old maps into the same lethal terrain. The question is no longer just about what was lost, but whether we can now find it. Advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery that can detect subtle subsurface disturbances offer a glimmer of hope. They have already located forgotten settlements and caravanserais. Could they one day pinpoint the fate of Cambyses's army or a legendary treasure caravan? Perhaps, but the desert guards its secrets jealously, and for every mystery solved, another seems to deepen. These unresolved stories are a crucial part of the caravan legacy, a haunting reminder of the immense risks taken and the finality of failure in a landscape that shows no mercy. How do we ensure that the knowledge we do have, the stories of both triumph and tragedy, are not themselves lost to time? The whispers of the caravan routes are now the focus of a global race against time. International teams are working to physically restore the crumbling caravanserais of Iran, their arched gateways and central courtyards being carefully rebuilt using traditional methods. In the deserts of Saudi Arabia, archaeologists are using high-resolution photography to document ancient rock art along the incense route, capturing images of camels and hunters etched into stone by long-vanished travelers. This is more than just preserving stones. It is about safeguarding a living heritage. Organizations like UNESCO partner directly with Tuareg and Bedouin communities to record the intangible knowledge that once guided these journeys. The complex navigation songs that describe star paths and the intricate craft of weaving camel saddles are now being documented in audio and video, ensuring that this wisdom, passed orally for generations, is not silenced forever. The threats are relentless and modern. Looters dig indiscriminately at archaeological sites, seeking valuable artifacts but destroying the context that gives them meaning. Sprawling cities expand their boundaries, paving over the very ground where ancient camels once trod. Perhaps most insidiously, climate change brings more extreme weather, with rare but devastating flash floods eroding fragile desert ruins and prolonged droughts further destabilizing the land. The legendary manuscripts of Timbuktu faced a direct and immediate danger. To save them from both conflict and the slow decay of time, a monumental project was launched to digitally scan every fragile page. This digital ark ensures that the legal rulings, medical texts, and personal letters from the caravan's golden age will be accessible to scholars and the descendants of their authors for centuries to come. These conservation initiatives do more than honor history, they actively empower communities. When a local craftsman teaches his ancient saddle-making technique to a new generation, or when a community benefits from cultural tourism at a restored caravanserai, it strengthens a living connection to the past. This work affirms that the story of the caravans is not a closed book, but a foundational chapter in our shared human narrative. As these efforts continue, one wonders what future technologies might reveal. Could new imaging techniques allow us to read the disintegrated scrolls from a buried library? Or will a drone survey in a remote wadi finally uncover a lost city mentioned only in myth? The desert still holds its cards close, but we are learning new ways to ask it to deal us in. A new wave of discovery is washing over the ancient sands, powered by tools the Caravaniers could never have dreamed of. Satellite imagery now peers down from the void, its electronic eyes spotting the faint, ghostly trails of submerged routes that are completely invisible from the ground. These are not the obvious paths, but the secret detours used in times of drought or danger, revealing a network far more complex and adaptable than any historical map has ever shown. Drones, buzzing like mechanical insects over the dunes, carry thermal sensors that read the temperature of the sand. A slight, unnatural coolness in a specific pattern can betray the presence of stone foundations just beneath the surface, the remains of a small, forgotten caravanserai that served as a vital, unrecorded refuge. In the Arabian desert, recent LiDAR scans have performed a kind of archaeological magic, using lasers to strip away the surface and digitally reveal the land's true form. This technology has pinpointed the locations of ancient watering holes, their craters now filled with centuries of sand, forcing historians to redraw their understanding of the incense route's most perilous stretches. The very biological fabric of the caravans is also yielding its secrets. DNA analysis is tracing genetic links between populations in North Africa and the Sahel, providing scientific proof of the profound human connections forged by generations of travelers, merchants, and guides who moved along these routes. This is no longer a solitary pursuit. The most exciting breakthroughs are happening at the intersections of disciplines, where a historian's interpretation of a medieval text guides a geophysicist to scan a specific valley, and where the oral histories of local Bedouin tribes help scientists understand what their machines have found. This collaborative spirit is our modern version of the caravan itself, a diverse group of experts sharing their unique knowledge to navigate the vast unknown of the past. Each technological advance promises a more dynamic and intimate reconstruction of this world. We are moving closer to understanding not just the routes they took, but the pace of their journeys, the seasons they traveled, and the personal stories of the people who made these epic crossings. As our tools grow more sophisticated, our appreciation for their incredible feats of endurance only deepens, transforming legend into documented reality. These stories of resilience and connection across impossible distances speak directly to our modern world. They remind us that the most daunting challenges are met not by individual genius alone, but by the shared knowledge and cooperative spirit of a community, a lesson carried across 1,000 years on the backs of camels. The romance of the caravan echoes far beyond the dunes, finding a permanent home in our collective imagination. Epic films paint the desert crossing with a grand, sweeping brush, where the long line of camels against a setting sun becomes a universal symbol of epic quest and personal transformation. Novels weave tales where the caravan is not just a mode of transport, but a crucible for the soul, a place where a simple shepherd boy can discover his personal legend. These stories, while often simplifying the gritty realities of thirst and bandits, capture an essential emotional truth. They remind us that the desert has always been a place where people go to find themselves, to be stripped of the non-essential and confront what truly matters. This cultural resonance keeps the spirit of the caravan alive, introducing its timeless drama to generations who may never feel the desert sun on their skin. Even interactive media like video games now play a role, embedding meticulously researched caravan routes into their digital landscapes. A player navigating these virtual trade paths unconsciously absorbs the geography and immense scale of these historical journeys, learning through experience the logistical challenges these travelers faced. This ongoing creative engagement proves that the caravan's narrative power is undiminished. It continues to serve as a potent metaphor for any long, difficult journey toward a cherished goal, whether that goal is spiritual, personal, or artistic. So, after this long exploration across seas of sand and through centuries of history, what is the final, lasting imprint of these incredible journeys? The legacy of the desert caravan is not merely a collection of artifacts or a list of trade goods. It is the very blueprint of our interconnected world, a testament to human resilience written in sand and memory. These journeys teach us that connection is not built by eliminating obstacles, but by learning to move through them with wisdom, cooperation, and an unshakable will. The Caravaniers did not conquer the desert, they listened to it, they adapted to its harsh rhythms, and in doing so, they wove a network that linked continents. Their story is one of profound innovation born from necessity, of diverse cultures finding common cause in the face of a shared challenge. They remind us that the most enduring progress is often slow, deliberate, and built on a foundation of shared knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. In our modern age of instant digital connection and fragile supply chains, the Caravan offers a timeless lesson. It shows us that true resilience lies in decentralization, in the depth of local knowledge, and in the strength of the human spirit to find a way, even across the most impossible terrain. The silence of the desert may have swallowed many of their names, but the paths they carved still guide us, reminding us that every journey begins with a single step into the unknown. The true treasure of the Caravan was not the gold or spices it carried, but the unbreakable human spirit it represents. Our journey through their untold story reveals a profound tapestry of courage, innovation, and interconnection woven across impossible terrain. These travelers did not merely cross the desert, they learned its secret language, forming resilient, mobile communities that turned the world's most hostile expanses into bridges of civilization. They mastered the stars and the sands, catalyzing exchanges of culture, belief, and knowledge that irrevocably shaped our collective history. Their legacy is not confined to the past, it is paved into our modern highways, echoed in our globalized markets, and alive in the scholarly work that continues to reclaim their narrative from the shadows. The explorer Wilfred the Siger, who himself traversed these vast spaces, captured its essence when he reflected that the desert gives nothing but takes nothing away. In that stark reality, we find the Caravan's ultimate lesson, a testament to the power of adaptation and raw perseverance. Their saga invites us to seek out the hidden histories in our own world, to listen for the whispers of the unsung heroes who have always worked to bridge our divide. If this story of human resilience has resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to join us on more journeys into the forgotten corners of our past.